You know, when we talk about China and North Korea, people usually think the two countries are super close, like best friend forever, right? But not so fast. At North Korea's recent event celebrating the 80th anniversaries of its Workers' Party, Li Qiang, China's #2, Xi Jinping's right-hand man, was straight up publicly snubbed by Kim Jong-un. Let's take a look. Here you can see Kim Jong-un warmly greeting the leader of Vietnam Communist Party, smiling, shaking hands, all friendly. And right next to them, Li Qiang was just standing there completely ignored. Hands awkwardly by his side, not even sure where to put them. Even watching through the screen, I could feel the secondhand embarrassment. Now you may think, hey, it was just a coincidence. Maybe Kim just didn't notice. Alright then, let's check out the next clip. When Kim Jong-un met Chinese delegation led by Li Qiang, he showed up alone. No top officials, no fancy welcome. If you didn't know who they are, you would think Li Qiang was reporting to Kim like someone who works for him. But when Kim met the Vietnamese delegation, a whole crowd of North Korean officials showed up. At least on the surface, it looked like an equal official meeting. And guess what? This isn't even the first time Kim Jong-un snubbed China. Back in July 2024, at the parade marking the 71st anniversary of the Korean War, North Korea invited ambassadors from Russia, Vietnam, Cuba, but not China. Which is insane to think about. You have to understand, this parade isn't just some regular event. It was to honor the hundreds of thousands of Chinese soldiers who died fighting in the Korean War. To me, that wasn't just ignoring China. That was straight up public humiliation. So here's the question. Aren't those two countries supposed to be as close as brothers? So why would Kim Jong-un go out his way to embarrass China in public? And even if the relationship isn't perfect, how does a small country like North Korea dare to slap his big brother in the face like that? Today we're going to break down what's really going on behind the scenes of China and North Korea's friendship. Hi everybody, I'm Tony. Welcome back to my channel. Before we start, please smash that like button, hype this video, and subscribe to this channel. Your support really keeps this channel going. Alright, back to the story. If we look at the relationship between China and North Korea, it actually has always been complicated. It's not like what people imagine, two socialist brothers holding hands all the time. You might say, wait, what do you mean by complicated? Didn't China help North Korea fight the Korean War? Yes, that's true. And China even lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers in that war. But here is what most people don't know. China never wanted to get involved in that war in the first place. They were dragged into it completely against their will. Before the Korean War even started, Kim Il-sung went to Moscow to see Stalin. He wanted Stalin's approval to launch a war and invade South Korea. The whole time, Stalin listened quietly, didn't even say much. He probably thought, alright, please just finish your presentation so I can get back to my vodka. And Kim kept talking about his battle plan. Made it sound like we're ready to attack, and it will be an easy win. But Stalin, a man who hadn't seen the battlefield since forever, probably didn't understand half of it. So he finally said, okay, how about this? Go ask Chairman Mao in China. If Mao agrees, I will agree too. That's such a classic boss move. Delegate the dumb decision to someone else. So Kim Il-sung rushed to China to see Mao. He told him, Stalin already said yes. As long as you agree, I'm gonna attack. Mao was really hesitant. First, the Communist Party had only just taken power in China barely 1 year ago. They were still trying to stabilize the country. Second, Mao was planning to invade Taiwan at the time. So he told Kim, maybe wait a little bit. Let us deal with Taiwan first, then we'll help you. But Kim said, we're so ready and we don't even need your help. At that point, what could Mao say? Stalin had already agreed. Kim was also pushing hard. Because back then, China still relied heavily on Stalin and the Soviet Union for military and diplomatic support. Mao didn't want to upset either of them. So in the end, he never actually said yes, but he also didn't say no. Without a solid yes, Kim Il-sung struck anyway. Then shit hit the fan. So how good was Kim Il-sung as a commander? Pretty damn good. 4 months into the war, he had already lost 95% of North Korea's territory. At one point, his forces were pushed back to the Yalu River on the China and the North Korea border. It was to the point that Kim Il-sung's daily meal were pretty much just rice with kimchi or kimchi with rice. Kim rushed to ask Stalin and Mao for help. When Mao heard that, he was like, okay, they're at my doorstep. If this keeps up, I will also be eating rice and kimchi very soon. I gotta do something. Mao totally misread the whole situation. He thought the US would crush North Korea, then head straight for China. So why did he think that way? Well, Mao wasn't exactly a sophisticated leader, unless it was about playing mind games. This guy was great at power play and manipulation, but outside of that, he knew almost nothing. I don't really know how Mao convinced himself the US would attack China after North Korea. Maybe he was playing too hard with his pleasure squad and started seeing things. Yeah, Mao also had his own pleasure squad too. We'll dive deeper into this topic in a future video. Please make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss it. And here's the case. You can't judge dictator by normal standards. These guys are basically idiots who think they're freaking smart. Why? Because nobody around them dares to tell the truth. Anyone who tells the truth gets dragged out, or even worse. Over time, they end up living inside the information bubble they built for themselves. So yeah, when people like that make decisions, they usually end up being totally insane and ridiculous. And no one proved that better than Chairman Mao. According to his personal doctor Li Qiang, in his memoir The Private Life of Chairman Mao, Mao lived a ridiculous, chaotic life. His daily routine was almost the same as our great general Kim Jong-il. He would wake up around 5 or 6 in the evening, eat something, then read the newspaper, and only start working around 9 p.m. But he was the head of state, with a mountain of decisions to make. But here's the problem. The guy never even went to college. He was a farmer by background. He didn't really understand much about anything. So most of the time, he had no clue what to do. He would stay up all night pacing around, trying to come up with ideas. And whenever he wanted to consult someone, it was already 3 a.m. Everyone else was asleep. The only people available were his bodyguards and soldiers. Then he would actually ask them, what do you think about this plan? But those guys didn't know any better. And even if they did, they couldn't say so. Not unless they wanted to get executed right there on the spot. So they would always just clap their hand and say, oh, that's a great idea, Chairman, that's brilliant. And Mao would go, well, seems like everyone loves it. Guess I'm right then. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this. A lot of the Chinese Communist Party's absurd policies back then were literally made under those same conditions. So here's the thing. The US didn't actually plan to invade China. But after the Korean War started, the US 7th Fleet immediately blocked the Taiwan Strait. That smashed Mao's dream of taking Taiwan. So if there are any viewers from Taiwan watching, you can thank Kim Il-sung for that one. But Mao got furious. He thought, fine, you American won't let me take Taiwan, maybe you will come after China next. I will have to send troops to Korea and show you what exactly I can do. So China's decision to send forces wasn't mainly about helping Kim to recapture lost territory. It was about China's own interest, or more precisely, Mao's own misjudgment and emotional need to act. Actually, beside Mao, hardly anyone in China wanted this war. After the Korean War, the relationship between China and North Korea did enter a honeymoon phase. But that honeymoon phase came with a condition: China's endless giving. See, in the 1960s, China's relationship with the Soviet Union suddenly soured. Why? Because China had grown stronger and didn't want to be bossed around by Moscow anymore. And both countries were led by men with massive egos. Each one of them thought they was the true leader of the communist world. So for those two self-obsessed leaders, both wanting to be big brother, winning over North Korea and other communist countries became a competition. For North Korea though, the rule was simple. Whoever gave them more money and aid was the real big brother. So what happens was China and the Soviet Union started competing to throw money at North Korea, Cuba, and other socialist countries in the Eastern Europe. China even had a term for it, the sugar daddy diplomacy. Even during China's Great Famine from 1959 to 1962, when around 20 million Chinese people starved to death, Beijing still kept sending food and resources to North Korea. But for Mao, being the top dog of socialism was worth any price. I mean, what's 20 million lives, right? You might say, okay, if that's the case, weren't China and North Korea like real brothers? Well, the first major shift in their relationship came in the late 1980s. By then, Mao was already 6 feet under, and Deng Xiaoping was in charge. Now, Deng was very different from Mao. He was more practical and more down to earth. I know some people still call him a dictator, but compared to Mao, he was definitely the better deal. China's economic boom really started under his reform and opening up policy. Sure, his main goal was to keep the Communist Party in power, but the truth is, ordinary Chinese people actually benefited from it. At the time, China's focus were making money and rebuilding the economy. So the old habit of throwing cash and resources at North Korea just to be called a big brother, the sugar daddy diplomacy, yeah, Deng wasn't having it. So China basically cut off most of its food and resource aid to North Korea. And soon after that, the Soviet Union collapsed too. Without China and the Soviet Union, North Korea lost both of its sugar daddies. The economy completely fell apart, and the country entered what they called the Arduous March, a famine that killed around 2 million North Koreans. So how stingy did China get with North Korea at the time? Back in Mao's time, China had given North Korea fighter jets. When they later needed repairs, Kim Il-sung went to Deng Xiaoping and said, "Hey, can you send people over to fix them?" Deng was like, "Sure, we can fix them if you pay." Kim was shocked. "What do you mean by pay? Even the planes were free." And Deng replied, "Yeah, but the free trial is over." But that still wasn't the main turning point. The next two events were what truly ignited the fallout between China and North Korea. In the late 1980s, Kim Il-sung started planning to hand power to his son, Kim Jong-il. He went to China and told Deng Xiaoping he wanted China's support for the succession. Deng was not happy about that at all. He didn't say much to Kim's face, but the moment he left, the People's Daily, China's state newspaper, published an editorial criticizing North Korea's father-to-son power transfer, calling it nothing short of a monarchy, the complete opposite of what socialism was supposed to stand for. The second event was when China decided to establish diplomatic ties with South Korea. At that time, China was opening up to the world, trying to build relationship with Western countries and boost its economy. So naturally, South Korea, with its growing wealth, became a very attractive partner. And for South Korea, China's huge market was too tempting to ignore. But for North Korea, this move was a slap in the face. Kim Il-sung even threatened that if China recognized South Korea, North Korea would establish diplomatic relations with Taiwan instead. Deng Xiaoping said, "Go ahead and try me." He told Kim straight up, "I know we don't give you guys much aid anymore, but we still give something. If you dare build ties with Taiwan, we'll destroy you." So even though Kim Il-sung was furious, in the end, North Korea backed down. Outwardly, he swallowed his pride. But deep down, Kim never forgot the humiliation. A few years later, he got his revenge. In the early 1990s, when Beijing was competing with Sydney to host the 2000 Olympics, North Korea's delegate cast their votes for Sydney. Beijing lost by exactly 1 vote. That single vote wasn't just about the Olympics. It was North Korea's way of declaring the brotherhood was officially over. So from the early 1990s to the early 2000s, China's relationship with North Korea stayed pretty cold. But around the year 2000, things suddenly got warm again. Why? Not because China wanted to get close, but because North Korea finally built the bomb. After 10 years of effort, they had a nuclear weapon. To this day, many people, even some Chinese, still believe North Korea must have gotten secret help from China. That's not true. North Korea's nuclear program actually began in the Soviet Union back in the 1950s. And their first reactor in the 1980s was also Soviet-made. China's stance has always been crystal clear. Beijing does not want North Korea to have nukes. Think about it. China and North Korea share a border. It's like living in a townhouse. You and your neighbor just separated by a wall, and your neighbor, who is known for being kinda unstable, started building nuclear weapons in his basement. Would you feel good about it? That's why for the past 2 decades, denuclearizing the Korean peninsula has been China's bottom line. At that time, to push for denuclearization, China took the lead and organized what became known as the Six-Party Talks. China's chairman at the time, Hu Jintao, really wanted to solve the North Korean nuclear issue during his term, as part of his political legacy. It was also a way to show China's leadership and a responsible big power image to the West. The logic of the talks was very simple. The US, Japan, and South Korea would provide aid and money, in exchange for North Korea giving up its nuclear weapons. And how did that turn out? North Korea took the money and then kept building nukes in secret. After 5 good years of pocketing benefits, Kim Jong-il decided he had enough. In 2009, he officially walked out of the Six-Party Talks and went right back to the testing nukes. Here's the thing, Kim Jong-il always thought politicians in the West, South Korea, and even China were naive. To him, they were amateurs. In his eyes, all these politicians were slaves to the election and the term limits. They just wanted quick wins, something that they can brag about before their term ends. And Kim, he knew exactly how to play that game. His strategy was also very simple. Say one thing and do another. Promise to stop developing nukes, get the aids, then once the deal is done and the politician leave office, go right back to business as usual. 4 years later, a new batch of leaders comes in, and the cycle starts all over again. But this is not the secret. Even the US knew it back then. Secretary of State at the time, Colin Powell, once said, America would never negotiate directly with a country as untrustworthy as North Korea. So if there were to be talks, China would have to host them. Meaning China has to put its own credibility on the line to vouch for North Korea. But the way the six-party talks ended, for China, it wasn't just a setback, it was betrayal. Absolute, undeniable betrayal. After North Korea completely played China during the six-party talks, Beijing was furious. So when Kim Jong-un was about to hand the power to his son, things between China and North Korea were not exactly warm. It was 2010, just a year before Kim Jong-il died. His health was failing fast. So he invited Hu Jintao to visit Pyongyang, hoping to formally introduce Kim Jong-un as his successor. But Hu Jintao straight up refused to go because of the six-party talks. A year later, in 2011, Kim Jong-il passed away. When China sent its official condolence message, there was one line that said, "Remain closely united around the Workers' Party of Korea under the leadership of Comrade Kim Jong-un." Now the last part, under the leadership of Kim Jong-un, wasn't supposed to be there. North Korea demanded it, China only added it after Pyongyang insisted. Many scholars believe that at the time, China actually wanted to take Kim Jong-il's death as a chance to end the Kim dynasty. They hoped North Korea would follow China's path, form a collective leadership, open up the economy, and finally become a normal country. China even worked with Kim's uncle, Jen Song-thaek, to plan a quiet coup to remove Kim Jong-un. But let's just say China's diplomacy wasn't exactly subtle. The plan failed, and Jen ended up getting executed by anti-aircraft guns. I covered that whole story in details in my Jen Song-thaek episode, so if you haven't watched it yet, please check it out after this one. But after that little stunt from Beijing, our gracious friend Kim Jong-un wasn't just gonna sit there and do nothing. And the chance came soon enough. So in February 2013, just 1 month before Xi Jinping officially became the chairman, Kim sent Xi a welcome gift. After 4 years of silence, North Korea conducted its third nuclear test, the first one under Kim Jong-un's rule. It was basically a huge slap across Xi's face. A few months later, in April, Xi attended the Boao Forum, his first major international event after taking office. During his speech, he said, "No one should pursue their own self-interest at the cost of regional stability." Coming from the leader of China, that line was basically a diplomatic middle finger to Kim Jong-un. Since then, China has voted for every UN resolution sanctioning North Korea's nuclear tests. Because of those sanctions and Xi Jinping's personal fallout with Kim Jong-un, relations between China and North Korea have completely frozen over. In recent years, trade between the two countries has dropped from over $5 billion a year to just a little over $2 billion. And that's mostly just limited to food and basic goods. Weapons, tech, and high-end machinery, forget it. China won't even talk about it. So what's life like inside North Korea now? According to a former North Korean diplomat who defected, family of North Korean embassy staff now beg their relatives aboard to bring back anything. Literally anything when they return home. Even used toothbrush, because the country is completely empty. Everything was in extreme shortages. Now you would think that with things this bad, Kim Jong-un would be desperate to build ties with China, to get more aids, more trade, and more help. But no, he is still out here playing his little games just to mess with Beijing. But why that is the case? Well, the answer is very simple. When North Korea was at its lowest point, our old friend Vladimir Putin came to rescue. In early 2022, Putin launched his war in Ukraine. By mid-2023, when Ukraine started its counter-offensive attack, Putin began looking everywhere for allies. And one name stood out: Kim Jong-un. By the end of 2023, the two had become unusually close. First, Russia's defense minister visited Pyongyang, the highest-ranking Russian official to do so in the 21st century. Then in September 2024, Kim Jong-un visited Russia. And just this past June, Putin returned the favor visiting Pyongyang. Relations between Moscow and Pyongyang have officially entered this honeymoon phase. But here's the thing, Russia has always been a country that plays for itself. Throughout the history and even today, it's never fought for anyone else's interest, only its own. So what could a country like North Korea, one that literally has nothing, could possibly offer to Putin? Well, ever since the Korean War began, Russia has been bleeding men on the front lines. Putin desperately needs soldiers, anyone he can throw into the fire. And for North Korea, human life is the cheapest thing. So it's a perfect trade. You need bodies? We have got plenty. For Kim Jong-un, on the other hand, the three things he has always dreamed of, natural resources, food, and military technology, Russia got them all. Since both countries are already sanctioned by the West, they can cooperate as freely and recklessly as they want. According to Japanese media, in just a few short months, Russia has already helped North Korea improve its rocket fuel. And what matters even more to Kim Jong-un? Russia doesn't even bother pretending to demand denuclearization anymore. Back in March, Moscow used its veto to block a UN resolution against North Korea, making it the first major country to openly support Pyongyang's right to keep its nukes. As for China and North Korea, well, like I mentioned before, things have been cold. But since no other country wants to deal with Pyongyang, China was always the fallback. Relations usually stay cold between two countries, then heat up again whenever outside pressure rises. But this time, things are a little different. Suddenly, there are new suitors, richer, hungrier, and far more dangerous. And with Putin back him up, Kim Jong-un's finally got someone to lean on. So he's venting years of frustration towards Beijing. And that's how we got the scene from the beginning of this video. In fact, no one is happier about this than Putin. Because now the power broker on the Korean peninsula isn't China anymore, it's Russia. And that leaves China with a tough choice to make. Should it finally cut North Korea loose, or pay an even higher price to win it back? If China let it go, decades of aid will go down to the drain. But if it doesn't, North Korea will just keep draining resources like a black hole. So what do you think China will do? Or what should China do in this situation? And let me know in the comments below. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, hype, and subscribe. With that, I will see you in the next one.